Hi there, and welcome to The Celebrity, the rise and fall of Joe Giudice, from reality fame to ruin. Joe Giudice was once the loud, confident husband who brought chaos, comedy, and energy to the Real Housewives of New Jersey. With his tough guy charm and brash humor, he seemed like the perfect reality TV personality, larger than life, unpredictable, and entertaining. But behind the cameras, Joe's real story wasn't just about family feuds or flashy spending. It was about deception, fraud, and a series of bad decisions that would turn his fame into a federal case file. Long before headlines screamed fraud, Joe's story looked like a classic American success tale. Before Bravo made him a household name, he presented himself as a hard-working family man chasing the dream. He owned small construction companies, dipped into real estate, and prided himself on providing for his wife, Teresa, and their growing family. When the couple joined Bravo in 2009, viewers saw a picture of luxury, a sprawling home, fancy cars, and an image of wealth that screamed success. Reality TV gave Joe something he had never experienced, the illusion of control and the validation of fame. Cameras followed every argument and celebration, turning the Giudices into a brand. On screen, their lifestyle looked enviable. The house glistened, the parties dazzled, and Joe appeared to be the man who had it all. But the truth was that much of it was built on sand. Behind the Bravo spotlight, the so-called empire Joe created was held together by lies, loans, and forged paperwork. His image of success was a mirage, a financial fantasy created through falsified documents and unpaid debts. To the audience, Joe was the provider. In reality, he was digging himself into a legal hole he could never climb out of. As early as 2010, whispers began to circulate around New Jersey's business circles. Local vendors complained of unpaid bills, creditors grew impatient, and financial inconsistencies started piling up. Joe's loan applications didn't add up, his bankruptcy filings left out key assets, and his taxes were, at best, suspicious. Tabloids began to sniff out the inconsistencies, and soon the successful businessman narrative started to unravel. By 2013, those whispers had become full-blown sirens. Federal prosecutors charged Joe and Teresa Giudice with a long list of serious crimes: mail fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud, and bankruptcy fraud. The glamorous couple from Bravo suddenly found themselves facing federal indictments. The very empire that had made them reality stars was now the evidence used against them. Court documents painted a brutal picture. The couple had lied on mortgage and loan applications, overstated their income, hidden assets during bankruptcy, and falsified tax returns. They had built their lavish lifestyle not on business acumen or hard work, but on deception. The money that funded their luxury cars and designer wardrobes wasn't earned, it was stolen. The reaction from fans was swift and divided. Some couldn't believe their favorite Bravo couple could be criminals. Others weren't surprised at all. For years, the Giudices had flaunted a lifestyle that seemed too extravagant for their modest businesses. Now, the illusion was gone. In 2014, Joe Giudice stood in federal court and finally admitted what many had already suspected. He wasn't a savvy entrepreneur or a misunderstood hustler. He was a fraudster. Joe and Teresa both pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including bankruptcy fraud and tax evasion. The confessions marked the end of their reality TV fairy tale. The sentencing was devastating. Joe was sentenced to 41 months in federal prison, while Teresa received a 15-month sentence. To ensure their 4 daughters weren't left without both parents, the judge staggered the sentences. Teresa served first, followed by Joe. For a man who had strutted on TV as the ultimate provider, the fall from grace was complete. From luxury SUVs to prison jumpsuits, it was the ultimate reality check. Behind bars, Joe's swagger disappeared. The tough guy who once boasted about being the man of the house was now just another inmate. Gone were the parties, the fame, and the illusion of control. What remained was a man stripped of everything: freedom, dignity, and the respect of millions who had once watched his every move. The impact on his family was heartbreaking. While Joe served time, Teresa struggled to hold their family together, caring for their daughters under the weight of public shame. The children, once adored by viewers, now became unwilling symbols of scandal. Their father's crimes were headline news, and their mother's struggles televised for the world to see. Joe's financial mess wasn't just a personal disaster. Its struggles were a wake-up call for reality TV's obsession with appearances. Behind every designer handbag and fancy car, there was debt, deceit, and desperation. The Jersey luxury the Giudices flaunted had been bought with lies, and now the price had to be paid. But prison was only the beginning of Joe's downfall. What awaited him after his release would prove even more devastating and far more permanent. When Joe Giudice walked out of prison, he didn't walk into freedom. He walked into another nightmare. His fraud convictions had triggered immigration proceedings, and because he was never a U.S. citizen, his future in America was hanging by a thread. For years, Joe had lived as if he belonged, building his life and raising a family in New Jersey. But the law saw him differently. To them, he wasn't a Bravo celebrity. He was a convicted felon, subject to deportation. As his prison sentence ended, immigration authorities stepped in. Joe was transferred straight from federal custody to an ICE detention center. His legal team filed appeals and petitions, pleading that deportation would destroy his family. He argued that his wife and children were U.S. citizens, that his entire life was in America, and that exile to Italy, a country he hadn't lived in since childhood, was unfair. But the law was merciless. Each appeal was denied, one after another. In 2019, after exhausting every possible option, Joe Giudice was deported to Italy. The man who once flaunted his American dream on national television was now living thousands of miles away, his family left behind. For someone who prided himself on being the protector and provider, the humiliation was public and permanent. Still, Joe couldn't stay out of the spotlight. Instead of rebuilding quietly, he used the media to tell his story. He gave interviews from Italy, appeared on Bravo specials with Andy Cohen, and flooded social media with photos of his new life. But instead of earning sympathy, his posts often came across as tone-deaf, smiling selfies and upbeat captions while his family was still trying to heal. Viewers couldn't help but notice the irony. The same man who cheated banks and the government was now asking for compassion and forgiveness. Meanwhile, the consequences of his actions rippled through his family. Teresa had to start over, raising 4 daughters on her own, rebuilding her finances, and salvaging what remained of her public image. The Giudice name, once synonymous with Jersey glamour, had become a symbol of scandal and excess. Even the Real Housewives of New Jersey franchise took a hit. What was once Bravo's shining success story became a cautionary tale about greed, pride, and the illusion of fame. But perhaps the most tragic part of Joe Giudice's downfall wasn't his prison time or deportation. It was his refusal to truly take responsibility. Time and again, he shifted blame, pointing fingers at bad luck, corrupt systems, or even Teresa. He painted himself as a victim of circumstance rather than the architect of his own collapse. To the public, it felt like the same deception that fueled his crimes had followed him into his attempts at redemption. In the end, Joe lost nearly everything: his freedom, his home, his reputation, and his chance at redemption in the country he once called home. The self-made man image was gone, replaced by the legacy of fraud and failure. Joe Giudice's story isn't just a tale of one man's mistakes. It's a reminder of how easily fame can distort reality. The same charisma that made him a television star also blinded him to accountability. And when the lights faded, there was no script left to save him. What remains is a simple truth. Joe Giudice didn't just lose his empire, he built his own downfall, one lie at a time.